Hey, what's up everyone? Eric Rossi, the guy with the eye, here today for another episode and for another review. And it's about a pretty awesome lens that's extremely affordable, but is it practical? Is it usable? Is it something good? I have the Sony 30mm f3.5 macro. So really, what you see with this is what you get. It's a lightweight 30mm macro lens. I use it with my Sony A6000, and with the A6, and this really works with the Alpha and NEX type cameras. So with the already popular Sony A6000, it's already super affordable, especially for a crop sensor camera that Sony puts out. Sony's got a lot of things going on. They have a lot of technology that's coming out, and that's one of them, especially with like high frames per second and everything, high definition video. But one of the tough things is finding great lenses for these Sony cameras without using Metabones and Canon lenses and Nikon lenses. It's tough to find a good lens, and one of the best lenses that they make, I think, is a 90mm macro Sony, but it's like $1,100, so that's a little out of price range from most of the market. But this little guy is under $300, and you can even find it used for $150, $200. If not, I got this for like $225 at Best Buy. And I was just curious about to see exactly how it would work, if it was really worth it, if it had any kind of, use, if it was actually sharp, because there were some reviews saying that, this isn't that sharp, especially at 3.5, it might not focus that close. But I did a lot of testing in a local park the other day, and I'm going to throw up a ton of pictures, maybe a sample video or two, just so you can see the quality, so you can see the different functions, the different types of environments and focusing abilities that this thing can have. And let me tell you, I was pretty blown away by this thing. So let me go over the quick tech specs, and I'll show up some of my photos on the screen as well, so that way you can really know what this is. So it's really based to have minimal chromatic aberration, ghosting. I even took some examples of really backlit, high contrasty type situations, and it actually fared up pretty well for what it was, and especially the backlight that it was getting. I mean, you can see maybe a little bit of ghosting and stuff like that, but it was a really extreme like sun flare situation type of thing. It does give you that true one-to-one macro magnification, and that's amazing, especially for under $300. You're getting that capability. But the obvious part is it's a 30mm lens, so you have to be very, very close by it. Pretty much probably one of my only cons about the lens. I'll cover that in a minute. It is autofocus, but also you can manually focus this lens, and it's extremely smooth. It's it's this little guy right here, so you have that over some of the other ones. It is still electronic, obviously. It's a f3.5 to f22. It's got 7 elements in 6 groups and a 7-blade aperture, so you're not going to get the best bokeh in the world. But once again, it's really a wide angle type lens. That 20-30mm under 50mm mark, and it does pretty well. I'll even throw up a quick selfie I did with it, with my Sony A6000. Once again, 9.5 centimeter distance, and you can really be on top of your subject. So that's I guess is one of the perks of it as well. 49mm filter thread if you really want to use those, and it only weighs 4.8 ounces. And one of the common complaints, speaking of the f-stop, when you have a macro lens, you don't always necessarily have to be shooting at the most minimal part. And that's really a lot of with these primes and 2.8 lenses. If you have a 2.8, a 3.5, doesn't mean you have to shoot at that rate. The one thing about macro, and I'll even show up a couple examples, I'll show up a shot, I think maybe I have an f3.5, an f5.6, and an f10, is that you're so super close, your depth of field is very shallow and narrow as it is. The f-stop doesn't matter as much in all reality. If anything, you want to play it a little safe. And I always probably put it around 5.6 just to give me a little bit more leeway. I even do that with my Nikon 60mm for like rings and stuff at weddings. So that's one thing that you should definitely keep in mind. And it actually has an interesting little lens head, and I'll show you that in 1 second. So taking the cap off, and if you kind of look at it here, see if you can kind of see it. Yeah, you can actually see it on the camera. It actually has a lens hood that's just like this. So this is your lens hood. And, it's since the circular aperture type of thing, this lens hood doesn't stick out. It makes it easier. It's all more or less on the camera, and it protects it, pretty well as well, without it being very, intrusive to anything else. So that's the actual camera. This is the actual lens hood. Keep an eye out for that. And, it's extremely easy to put on and put off. And essentially that's it. And that's one of the unique, kind of weird things you're not used to seeing. But that's one thing you should know about this lens. So this is essentially what it looks like on the Sony A6000. Obviously I have the black edition, there is a silver edition, and it's just built really well and light, and it just feels, extremely awesome to, use. And that's, once again, that's more the perks of the Sony system, and this is what I use on the side for travel and everything, these types of, this type of camera. And I think it did its job. I don't know if it necessarily can be, I guess it can be, since that 35 millimeter range, a street type camera. I still feel it was maybe a little too tight, especially kind of walking up and sneaking some things. But it definitely held like focus well. It definitely helped track. I know that really kind of, goes with the camera body, and it is fast enough with the Sony A6000. I think it's 11 frames per second or something. But the lens actually tracked really well. It held up, very good speed, very easy to focus. So there are a lot of perks about this thing for under a $300, and I even say high quality lens. And once again, you might hear people say that, oh, it's soft around the edges, but you are so shallow, you are so tight into it that it almost doesn't matter. And that's why I say shoot at 5.6. It might be something to give you just a touch more leeway. So I've been talking, as I said, you've seen a spectrum of, maybe a video or two, and especially photos that I took. And I really think it's a highly recommended product, or should be highly recommended. Once again, the only thing that gets me is its focal length of it being really too short, 30 millimeters. But once again, Nikon makes a 40 millimeter. That's pretty affordable on the Nikon side. But for something easy that you can use for landscapes, that you can use for, I'm not necessarily use a macro for a landscape, but it doesn't necessarily matter. It holds really well. You can use it for landscapes. If you can maybe just get a little bit more out of it, you can use it for street photography. But for macro photography, it does its job. It does what it needs. And it's pretty sharp, especially down the center.